Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and for those of you who are new, welcome. So today I thought that I wanted to sit down and do a video about how I plan and organize my life as someone who is an insanely forgetful person. Generally speaking, I feel like my friends see me as very organized. I'm usually on top of things, but actually, in real life, I'm very forgetful, and in order to stay on top of the work that I have to do and everything that I kind of need to get to, I have a bunch of kind of little strategies that I use to make sure that I don't forget anything on my list. So that's what I'll be sharing with you today, and these are super, super easy tips that anyone can implement to make their lives a little bit easier, so let's get started. Okay, so tip number one is to keep your notes in reach. Now, anytime that I'm in a Zoom class or maybe a webinar, or maybe I'm just sitting at my desk doing homework, a lot of the times I'll have a thought that pops up into my head. Maybe it's like a creative idea for a project I want to do in the future. Maybe it's a to-do list for something I have to do. Maybe it's a reminder to text someone or FaceTime someone. But either way, I'm always thinking of these things and, being like, oh, I have to do this. So you always want to make sure that you have some kind of notepad or post-it note or notebook within reach so you can write stuff down. For example, I have a variety of things because, like I said, I'm super forgetful. I have to write everything down, just like notepads like this where you have just like a bunch of papers that you can write on. If you want something cuter, I also have these little, I don't know if you can see them, but they're these little Japanese like pieces of paper. They're not sticky or anything, they're just a notepad, but I'll usually take one and like write something on the back if I need it. And of course I have my trusty bullet journal, and this journal, it's not for anything in particular. I just have it literally right next to me on my desk at all times in case I hear my professor say something that I want to write down. And I'm not just talking about having a subject notebook, that's a little different, but I'm saying if it's not exactly related to what you're learning, if my professor, for example, gives a book review or gives a recommendation for a film I want to see and it's not really pertinent to the class material, I always like having a notebook where I can just kind of put all of that stuff down. So if I'm flipping through these pages, I have a list of books that I want to read. I have some steps written down for my dance class so I don't forget them. I have some notes about classes I want to take next fall. I have notes about a webinar I went to, some notes for a club, just ideas that I have. So like I said, this is just an everything notebook, something I can have right next to me that's not subject particular, that I can just write down everything and have in one place. Whenever you're working, whenever you're doing anything, just make sure you have some notes and a pen within reach. You never want to have to go get up and scramble to find something to write with or to write on, because like I said, as soon as you hear it, you're going to think that, oh yeah, I can write it down later, but you're going to forget. So just have something within reach. And kind of the same thing goes for at night. When I'm sleeping, sometimes I'll wake up and have an idea or a thought, and I'll want to write it down. And in the middle of the night, you don't want to get up and scramble through your desk drawers or go to your bookshelf or try to find a pen downstairs in the kitchen. You want to make sure that everything is right there. So even when I'm asleep, I just have like these little notepads and stuff like next to me because my bed is next to my desk. And just make sure I have a pen that's within reach. So if I have something that I need to write it down, I can write it down. Tip number 2 is to set alarms before class. So personally, I have 10-minute alarms set to ring before every single class I have during the week. And for me, this really helps me because I'm studying from home right now. I'm studying online, doing online classes. And I find that since I know I'm very forgetful, if I don't have the alarm set, I'll find myself looking at the clock in the living room if that's where I'm hanging out, or maybe like picking up my phone like every 2 seconds trying to check what time it is so I'm not late. But because I have the alarm set, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can just kind of like go do my thing freely, and then knowing that I'll have a phone that rings when it's time to go to class, I can just like not worry about it and just not have to keep an eye on the clock or anything or be nervous. I know the alarm will just ring when it's time to go. And that's what I do for online classes, but it actually really helps for in-person too, because depending on what class you have and what dorm you live in, it takes different amounts of time to get there. So when I had a class that was maybe a little bit further, like half an hour away, I wasn't really thinking about it. I would have alarms half an hour before that class saying like, hey, like time to, get going for this class. And that way I'd know, okay, it's time for me to like grab my bag, put on my coat and shoes, grab my keys and leave. And that way I would always make it to class on time, and I never had to worry about being late or just keeping an eye on the clock. Tip number 3 is to wake up at the same time every day. Now, I know this probably isn't going to be a super popular tip among college students because generally speaking, when you're in college, if you have an 8 a.m. class, you tend to wake up like right before. If you have an 11 a.m. class, you'll tend to probably sleep in a bit later. But I found that when I wake up at different times in the day, I'm way more likely to forget to do something that I have to do, especially if it's not a part of my regular weekly routine. What I mean by that is that your classes happen every single week at the same time. So they're fairly easy to remember. But we always have those kind of miscellaneous events happening, whether that's a work shift, whether that's a Zoom meeting with a professor, whether you have to jump on a call with somebody for like an extracurricular or club. There's always something going on that kind of pops up sporadically. It's not really a part of your weekly routine. And I find that, so for example, I wake up at 8 a.m. every day. And that's not particularly early, but I think that waking up before kind of like that 9 to 5 work hour section of the day is really useful, because right when I wake up, I can check my schedule and say, oh yeah, I have this meeting at 10 a.m. I totally forgot about it, but now let me set an alarm and just make sure I go. Everything kind of happens between that 9 to 5, at least for me. So if I wake up a little bit before then, I don't run this risk of sleeping in through the day and accidentally missing something that I needed to do. Tip number 4 is to use a 2-calendar system. Now, I use Google Calendar to track down all of my events and places that I need to be, and then I use an agenda to track things like my homework or projects or to-do lists, and I just find that having 2 separate platforms is really nice because it's not too many. 2 is pretty easy to manage, and I find that if I had all of my events and meetings and homework and deadlines in one spot, it would just get very messy and very disorganized super quick. And when it comes to events that I need to go to or places that I have to be, I have made it a super strict habit to always just open my phone and create an event on my Google Calendar and write it down immediately. Even if it's something as simple as FaceTiming a friend, if it's pre-planned, I really recommend that you just write it down and make it a habit to just put it in your calendar as soon as you make that plan, because it's so easy to forget those little things. And additionally, you're not gonna get to it later when you think you do. I've had so many times where, for example, I've called the dentist and I've had to make like an appointment for like a tooth cleaning or whatever that you have to do every 6 months, and they'll say, okay, Mira, like your appointment is gonna be on this day at 2:30, and I think, okay, great. That day at 2:30, I'll write it down later. I never remember to write it down later, and then the day comes and they're all techie now, so they have like the little text message that says, hey, you have an appointment today later at 2:30, and I think, oh my gosh, I do have an appointment later at 2:30, and I totally forgot because I never wrote it down. So every time you kind of make an appointment like that or plan an event, just make it a habit to pull out your phone, if you use the Google Calendar app, and just write it down immediately, because I promise you're not going to remember to do it later like you think you are. Additionally, I just remembered, but if you don't like alarms because you find them really loud or jarring or distracting, I'm kind of going back to that first or second tip I mentioned earlier. If you use Google Calendar, there's an option to actually get a notification 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before, 20 minutes before the event. So if you don't like the loud noise that alarms will kind of bring, you can just use Google Calendar and a banner will pop up on your phone or on your laptop with no noise. It'll just come up visually, and that's a great way to remember that you have events coming up too. All right, so the last tip I have for you is tip number 5, which is to have weekly and daily check-ins. Now, if I'm doing a big project, for example, something like writing a big research paper for one of my classes or planning a YouTube video, chances are I'm not going to finish everything I need to in one day. It's going to span a little bit of a longer time period. So when I do these weekly check-ins, what I like to do is I'll open my agenda, and let's say I'm on the current week, and either I'm at the beginning of the week or the end. But what I like to do is I like to flip the page and go back to the previous week just for a minute, just to kind of scan through the days and say, okay, did I leave anything uncompleted? Are there any check boxes I didn't check off? Is there anything that I need to carry over into the next week? And that's just a really good practice to have, because sometimes you write things down in your agenda and you don't get to it and you kind of forget. So it's always good to just check back really quick and make sure you've actually carried over everything you need to do. And with the daily check-ins, I know earlier in this video I talked about looking at your schedule in the morning, but if you're one of those people that does not want to wake up at 8 a.m. every day, which I totally understand, you can do this, which is basically to check over your schedule the night before, and just doing that will give you a better understanding of when you need to set your alarm in the morning. And I think that when you look over your schedule the night before, you just feel more settled. You just feel a sense of calm because you know what's coming, you're not going to be surprised, and you can just prepare the night before for anything you might need for tomorrow. So definitely do that. I feel like it's just a great way to keep track of everything you need to do from the week prior, just carrying everything over and then planning ahead for the next day. And with that, that is the end of the video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching the whole way through. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have any tips or tricks or strategies for kind of how you stay organized and how you stay on top of your work, please comment them down below. I'm always looking to try new things and I love seeing what works for other people. But yeah, with that, that's all for today. So I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone.